Okay, let's talk about an idea. An idea so powerful that it could literally redraw the map of an entire continent. In the 19th century, that idea was nationalism, and its story, well, it's a wild ride of dreams, revolution, and ultimately destruction.
So here's the big question we're going to tackle. How did a movement that started with these beautiful ideals of liberty and brotherhood end up creating some of the worst conflicts the world had ever seen? It's a real paradox.
Our story really kicks off with this incredible image, this dream captured back in 1848 by a French artist, Frédéric Souriau. I mean, just look at it. It's this vision of hope, a long parade of people from all over Europe and America marching right past the Statue of Liberty. Each group has its own flag, their own unique costumes. It's a celebration of a future where all these different free, democratic nations could live together in total harmony. But what exactly was this new kind of country they were all dreaming of? It was called the nation-state. And you have to understand, this was a totally revolutionary concept. The old way, a kingdom, was kind of like a landlord's giant estate. The king was the landlord, and everyone else was just a tenant. But a nation-state, that was imagined as more of a family home, where everyone felt like they belonged, where they shared a history and a common destiny, a total game changer.
And when you put them side by side, the difference is just wow. On one hand, you have the old dynastic empire, basically a random patchwork of different peoples who often didn't even speak the same language, all held together by loyalty to one king. They were subjects. But on the other hand, you have the nation-state, one people, one shared identity. And they weren't subjects anymore, they were citizens, with rights and a real say in their own government.
So, where did this incredibly powerful idea come from? It wasn't dreamed up in some quiet university library. Nope, it was forged in the fire of revolution. To see the first clear, explosive expression of nationalism, we have to go back to France, to the earth-shattering events of 1789.
The French revolutionaries basically gave the world a recipe for how to build a nation. So what were the ingredients? You had the idea of la patrie, the fatherland, and le citoyen, the citizen. You throw in a new flag, the tricolor, to replace the old royal one. You add a national assembly so that people have a voice. And then you bind it all together with one common language and one set of laws for everybody. These were all real, practical things you could do to make millions of individuals feel like one collective whole.
And here's the thing, they didn't keep this recipe a secret. The revolutionaries truly believed it was their mission to spread liberty everywhere. As their armies marched across Europe, they took these ideas with them, inspiring educated folks in other countries to start their own Jacobin clubs and start demanding a new way of doing things.
So once this idea was out, it set the stage for a massive conflict that would really define the next 50 years. It was basically a continent-wide tug of war. On one side, you had the forces for change, the liberals and the nationalists. And on the other, you had the old monarchies, fighting tooth and nail to hang on to power.
And you can see this constant back and forth, this cycle of revolution and crackdown. In 1815, after Napoleon was finally defeated, the old monarchies all got together at the Congress of Vienna and tried to stuff the revolutionary genie back in the bottle. But it was too late. The idea was out there. Uprisings flared up again in 1830, and then in 1848, a huge wave of revolutions, they called it the Springtime of Peoples, swept across the continent. It really looked like the old order was about to crumble for good.
Now, 1848. That was the high point of this whole liberal dream. In Germany, a bunch of middle-class professionals, doctors, lawyers, professors, they all gathered at the Frankfurt Parliament to write a constitution for a new, unified German nation. They even offered the crown to the King of Prussia. But he turned them down flat. He sided with the other monarchs. And that was just a devastating blow. It proved that ideals and debates weren't enough to beat the old powers of the monarchy and the army. The dream was crushed.
Okay, this is a really crucial point. After the failures of 1848, the whole game changes. The strategy for building a nation takes a hard turn. The era of the idealists, the poets and professors, the dreamers, that's over. Now it's the age of the ruthless state builders who believed in one thing: power.
And the poster child for this new hard-nosed approach was this guy, Prussia's chief minister, Otto von Bismarck. He was a master of what's called realpolitik, basically politics based on practical, tough-minded reality, not on ideals. He famously said that the great questions of the day wouldn't be settled by speeches and votes, but by iron and blood.
And he was not kidding. Bismarck played the map of Europe like a grandmaster plays a chessboard. He engineered a brilliant and totally ruthless plan, starting 3 carefully chosen wars in just 7 years.
Each war was a strategic move that brought more German states under Prussia's control. Until finally, after beating France in 1871, he could declare checkmate and announce the brand new German Empire.
But Bismarck was smart. He knew that a nation born from war needed more than just a powerful army to stay together. It needed a soul. It needed symbols people could rally around. And for that, they turned to artists, who basically gave the nation a human face. For Germany, that face was Germania.
And she was just packed with meaning. I mean, let's decode this. Every little detail is a message. The crown of oak leaves stands for heroism. The sword means she's ready to fight. But look closer. Look at the flag she's holding. That's the black, red, and gold of the failed liberal revolutionaries from 1848. It was a genius move, really, blending the old dream of liberty with the new reality of military might.
So creating these powerful, unified nations like Germany, it felt like a huge win for nationalism. But it was also a turning point. And this is where our story takes a really dark turn. We're going to see how this idea, which started as a unifying dream of freedom, began to morph into something way more dangerous.
By the late 1800s, nationalism had just lost its way. That beautiful, idealistic dream had soured. It became intolerant. It became aggressive. It became all about competition. The big European powers started using nationalism to justify their empires, scrambling for colonies and power around the globe. It wasn't about we the people anymore. It was about us versus them.
And the most dangerous place on earth for this new aggressive nationalism was the Balkans. It was a complete tinderbox of ethnic tension. You had new nations breaking away from the dying Ottoman Empire, and every single one of them was intensely jealous of the others. On top of that, you had all the big European powers meddling in the region, trying to grab influence. The place became known as the powder keg of Europe, and you just knew it was only a matter of time before someone lit the fuse.
So you have this toxic cocktail of intolerant nationalism, imperial rivalry, and a massive military buildup. It was a perfect storm just waiting to happen. The great powers of Europe were like sleepwalkers heading straight for a cliff. And in 1914, that powder keg finally blew, and the world was plunged into war.
It's just incredible when you think about it. The very same idea that started with Soryu's beautiful painting of peaceful nations marching in brotherhood, that idea, once it got twisted together with imperial ambition, led directly to the catastrophe of the First World War, a tragic ending to a story that began with so much hope. Which leaves us with a pretty heavy question, one that's just as relevant today as it was more than 100 years ago. It really makes you think about that thin line between healthy pride in your country and the kind of aggressive rivalry that can lead to absolute disaster.